I sat there with my hands clasped tight, watching my parents play the perfect victims while demanding every cent I had earned over 10 years. But then the bailiff opened the folder to read the asset list they had just signed. By the third item, the judge went pale, slammed his gavel, and screamed for security. In that moment, my parents realized they had not stolen my life. They had just signed their names to a bomb. My name is Avery Harper, and as I sat in Department 67 of the San Diego County Superior Court, I realized that the silence of a courtroom is heavier than any noise on earth. It is a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room until the only thing left to breathe is the recycled desperation of people watching their lives get dismantled. I was 32 years old. I had built a career in forensic risk analysis. I owned a penthouse in the Gaslamp Quarter. I had an investment portfolio that would make most day traders weep with envy. But in this room, under the fluorescent hum of state-funded lighting, I was none of those things. I was a child. I was a liability. According to the man currently speaking at the podium, I was a danger to myself and others. "Your Honor, we are not doing this lightly," Grant Halstead said. His voice was a rich baritone, the kind of voice you pay $400 an hour for. He smoothed the lapels of his charcoal suit, turning slightly so his profile caught the light. "The Harper family is a pillar of this community. Reverend Elias Harper has spent 40 years shepherding lost souls. Do you think he wants to be here, asking for legal control over his adult daughter?" Halstead paused for effect. It was a good pause. The man was a shark in Italian leather. "We have submitted affidavits from 2 independent medical professionals attesting to Ms. Harper's rapid decline," Halstead continued, gesturing vaguely toward the defense table where I sat alone. My lawyer was present, technically, but per our strategy, he was essentially furniture. Erratic spending, paranoid delusions, a refusal to communicate with her family, the substance abuse issues documented in Exhibit B are particularly troubling. We are asking for an emergency temporary conservatorship to freeze her assets before she bankrupts herself or, God forbid, harms herself. I looked across the aisle. My parents, Elias and Lorraine Harper, sat behind their lawyer like a portrait of grieving nobility. My father wore his Sunday best, a dark navy suit that smelled of cedar and self-righteousness. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his face set in a mask of stoic suffering. Beside him, my mother dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. She looked small, fragile, the perfect picture of a mother whose heart was breaking for her wayward child. It was a masterful performance. If I did not know them, if I did not know that the suit my father wore was bought with money skimmed from a charity fund, or that my mother's tears were as calculated as a tax return, I might have believed them too. Judge Whitaker certainly did. The judge was a man of the old guard, with a face like crumpled parchment and eyes that had seen too many excuses. He looked at my parents and saw his own peers. He saw respectable, God-fearing citizens dealing with a hysterical, ungrateful millennial. Then he looked at me. I sat with my back straight, hands folded on the table. I did not fidget. I did not speak. I did not roll my eyes at the accusations of drug addiction, even though the only thing I was addicted to was the truth, and maybe sparkling water. "Ms. Harper," Judge Whitaker said, his voice grating like gravel, "your counsel has filed no counter-motions. You have offered no rebuttal to these serious claims. Do you understand the gravity of what is happening here? The court is poised to grant your parents full legal authority over your estate and your person." I looked the judge in the eye. My expression was blank. I had practiced this face in the mirror for 3 days. It was the face of defeat. It was the face of a woman who had nothing left to fight with. I remained silent. Let the record show the respondent is non-responsive. Whitaker sighed, shaking his head. He looked back at my father with a sympathetic nod. "Reverend, I am sorry your family has to go through this. It is a tragedy when a bright young woman loses her way, but the law is here to protect her when she cannot protect herself." My father stood up slowly, nodding with humble gratitude. "Thank you, Your Honor. We only want what is best for Avery. We just want to bring our little girl home and get her the help she needs." The court grants the petition for emergency conservatorship, Whitaker declared, reaching for his gavel. Control of all assets, real estate, and financial instruments belonging to Avery Harper is hereby transferred to the conservators, Elias and Lorraine Harper, effective immediately upon signature of the acceptance of duties. The air in the room shifted. I saw the tension leave my mother's shoulders. I saw the corner of my father's mouth twitch upward. A microscopic victory lap. They had done it. They had won. They had successfully argued that the daughter they had exploited for years was crazy, and the state of California had just handed them the keys to my life. Grant Halstead opened a thick leather folder and slid a document across the table to my parents. "Just sign here, and here," he whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "And it is done." My father picked up the pen. He did not hesitate. He signed his name with a flourish. My mother followed, her hand trembling slightly not from nerves, but from the adrenaline of a gamble paying off. They thought they were signing a deed to a gold mine. "Signed and witnessed," Halstead said, beaming. He turned to the judge. "We will begin the transfer of assets immediately to ensure their safety." "One moment," a deep voice cut through the celebration. It was Deputy Ruiz, the bailiff. He was a large man, standing by the side of the bench, holding a clipboard that I had ensured was placed in the specific intake pile that morning. "Your Honor," Ruiz said, his tone flat and professional. "Per the amended specificities of this conservatorship filing, and due to the liquidity variance flagged in the preliminary audit, I am required to read the inventory and appraisal of assets and liabilities into the public record immediately following the transfer of ownership. Standard procedure for high-risk estates." Judge Whitaker looked bored. "Is that necessary right this second?" "Deputy, we have a full docket. It is a mandatory compliance requirement for this specific asset class, Your Honor," Ruiz said, not moving. "It will only take a moment. The conservators have just assumed full legal liability for these items. It is for their protection that the record reflects exactly what they have acquired." My father waved his hand dismissively, barely looking at the bailiff. "It is fine, Your Honor. We know what our daughter owns. We are ready to take on the burden. There is no need to waste the court's time." "I am afraid the protocol is strict, sir," Ruiz said, stepping forward. He did not ask for permission. He opened the folder. My father huffed, leaning back in his chair, shooting a look at my mother that said, "Let the help talk. We have already won." They were mentally counting the money. They were imagining the sale of my apartment, the liquidation of my stocks, the clearing of my savings to pay off my brother Mason's debts. I unclasped my hands under the table and pressed my palms against the smooth wood. My heart rate did not spike. I was the calmest person in the room. "Item 1, Deputy Ruiz read, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "Real property located at 1200 Pacific Highway, Unit 42, penthouse condominium, estimated market value $2.4 million. My mother let out a small, audible gasp. She knew I did well, but she did not know I did that well. Greed flashed across her face so nakedly it was almost obscene. My father sat up straighter. $2 million? That was enough to bury every mistake he had made in the last decade. "Encumbrances on Item 1, Ruiz continued without pausing. "Primary mortgage satisfied. However, subject to a secondary lien held by the IRS for unpaid gift tax liabilities inherited via transfer, and a pending civil forfeiture hold regarding associated wire fraud investigations linked to the property address." My father's smile faltered. He frowned, tilting his head. "Wait, what?" he muttered. Ruiz ignored him. "Item 2, Stonebridge Investment Portfolio. Total value, $850,000. The smile returned to my father's face. 800 grand. Cash. That was the lifeline. "Encumbrances on Item 2. Ruiz droned on. "Frozen pending federal audit. Portfolio is currently leveraged as collateral against a 300% short position on volatile foreign currency. Executed automatically at 9 this morning. Current margin call status active. The owner of this account is immediately liable for a negative balance of $1.2 million. The silence in the courtroom shattered. "What?" Grant Halstead snapped, standing up. "That is impossible. She has blue-chip stocks. What do you mean? -1 million?" "Sit down, counselor," Judge Whitaker barked, though he looked confused himself. "Deputy, continue." My parents were frozen. The blood was draining from my mother's face. My father looked like someone had just punched him in the gut. They had just signed a document accepting full legal responsibility for my finances. They thought they were inheriting wealth. Instead, they had just assumed a debt that would swallow the church, their house, and everything they owned. But that was just the appetizer. "Item 3, Deputy Ruiz read, turning the page. This was it. This was the one. Intellectual property and digital archives. Ruiz read, specifically, a decrypted ledger containing 10 years of transaction history for the entity known as Harper Global Outreach, including a metadata-tagged list of beneficiaries for unrecorded cash disbursements labeled as charitable gifts. Judge Whitaker froze. His hand, which had been reaching for his water glass, stopped in midair. The inventory includes, Ruiz continued, his eyes scanning the page, receipts for private school tuition, luxury vehicle leases, and vacation rentals paid for by said charity on behalf of... Ruiz hesitated. He squinted at the paper, then looked up at the judge. He looked back at the paper. On behalf of whom? Deputy Whitaker asked, his voice trembling slightly. He knew, somewhere in the back of his mind, the reptilian brain that sensed danger was screaming. Ruiz read the name. It was the name of a woman who lived in a very expensive condo in La Jolla, a woman who happened to be Judge Whitaker's mistress. And, Ruiz continued, direct wire transfers to the re-election committee of... The judge's face went from pale to a shade of gray that usually precedes a cardiac event. He looked at my father. My father looked at the judge, his eyes widening in horror as he realized what list was being read. He realized that the blackmail material he had used to keep people in line was no longer his secret weapon. It was now a public record, read aloud by a court officer, listed as an asset he had just claimed ownership of. "Stop!" Judge Whitaker screamed. He slammed his gavel down so hard the sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. The wood of the sounding block splintered. "Stop reading, Deputy. I order you to stop." Judge Whitaker stood up, his chair flying back and hitting the wall. He was breathing hard, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. He looked at the court reporter, whose fingers were hovering over the stenotype machine. "Strike that," Whitaker yelled, his voice cracking. "Strike the last record. Bailiff, seal that document. Clear the court. I want this courtroom cleared immediately." "Your Honor," Halstead stammered, looking between the terrified judge and his terrified clients. "What is going on?" "Security!" Whitaker roared, pointing a shaking finger at my parents. "Get them out of here. Take them into custody for disruption. Seal the exits. Nobody leaves with that file." Pandemonium broke out. 2 other bailiffs moved toward the aisle. My mother began to wail, a high-pitched sound of pure terror. My father looked at me. For the first time in my life, he did not look at me with disappointment or calculated affection. He looked at me with absolute fear. He realized I had not lost my mind. He realized I had not been reckless. He realized that every debt, every lien, every toxic asset, and every piece of incriminating evidence in that folder had been carefully, meticulously wrapped in a bow and handed to him, and he had signed for it. The bailiff, Deputy Ruiz, closed the folder with a snap. He looked at the judge, then he looked at me. There was the faintest shadow of a smirk on his face. He knew. I had mailed him the anonymous tip about the clerical error in the filing 2 days ago that forced this reading. As the security guards grabbed my father by the arms and my mother collapsed into her chair sobbing about her reputation, I finally moved. I stood up. I smoothed the skirt of my simple black dress. I picked up my purse. The courtroom was a chaotic swirl of shouting voices and running footsteps, but I felt a profound, cool stillness. I looked at my father as they dragged him backward. Our eyes locked. "You wanted to own me." I thought, the words ringing clear and cold in my mind. You wanted everything that was mine. Well, congratulations. Dad, you got it. I turned my back on them. Now, it is time to pay up. I walked toward the heavy oak doors, leaving the wreckage behind me. But to understand how we got to this moment, how a pastor's daughter decided to burn her family to the ground using their own matches, we have to go back. We have to go back 2 weeks, to a birthday dinner in La Jolla, and a bill that cost a lot more than just money. 2 weeks before the gavel cracked the wood in Department 67, I was sitting at a table draped in white linen, watching my mother orchestrate the illusion of a happy family. We were at the Marine Room in La Jolla, the kind of restaurant where the waves crash against the windows and the menu does not list prices for the specials, because if you have to ask, you are in the wrong tax bracket. It was my brother Mason's 34th birthday. To anyone looking at us from the other tables, we looked like the American dream personified. My father, Reverend Elias Harper, sat at the head of the table, radiating a quiet, silver-haired authority. My mother, Lorraine, was glowing, her skin smoothed by expensive creams and even more expensive lighting. She held her phone up, adjusting the angle to capture the sunset, the crystal wine glasses, and Mason's forced smile. "Everyone lean in," she commanded, her voice tight with the stress of art direction. "Mason, look successful. Tessa, show the ring. Avery, try to look a little less severe." I shifted in my chair, forcing the corners of my mouth upward. My mother snapped the photo, inspected it, applied a filter that made us all look 10 years younger, and immediately posted it to the church's social media page and her personal account. I knew the caption before she even typed it. It would be something about blessings, divine favor, and the strength of the family unit. "Blessed," she whispered as she hit send. "There, the congregation loves seeing us celebrate. It gives them hope." I took a sip of my sparkling water. It was the only thing I had ordered. Across from me, my sister-in-law, Tessa, was scanning the wine list with the predatory focus of a hawk spotting a field mouse. Tessa Vaughn, or Harper, as she now insisted on being called in every possible context, was a study in overcompensation. She claimed to come from old money in Connecticut, a lineage of textile magnates and equestrian trophies. In reality, she was a chaotic force of nature who treated service staff like furniture and treated me like a line of credit. She wore a dress that was slightly too formal for dinner and jewelry that was slightly too large to be tasteful. "We will start with the seafood tower," Tessa told the waiter without looking at him. She waved a manicured hand. "The large one, and add the caviar service, the ossetra. Not the domestic. We are celebrating." She looked at Mason, who was busy ignoring the table to scroll through a sports betting forum on his phone under the table. "Right, babe." "Yeah, whatever," Mason grunted, not looking up. "Get the lobster, too. And a bottle of the 2015 Cabernet," Tessa added. "Actually, make it 2. My father-in-law appreciates a good vintage." My father nodded benevolently, accepting the tribute. He did not drink much, but he loved the aesthetic of expensive wine sitting in front of him. It matched the suit. I watched the waiter scurry away. I did the math in my head. The seafood tower was $200. The caviar was another $150. The wine was $300 a bottle. We were 10 minutes in, and the tab was already pushing $1,000. "Avery, you aren't drinking?" Tessa asked, her voice syrupy sweet, but with a metallic aftertaste. She reached for the breadbasket, tearing off a piece with aggressive precision. "You act like you are on the clock. Relax. It is a party." "I have an early morning tomorrow," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Quarterly audits." "Boring," Mason muttered, finally putting his phone down. He looked at me with bloodshot eyes. "You live like a monk. Ava, what is the point of making all that money if you sit around drinking tap water?" "It is sparkling," I corrected, "and I'm saving for a down payment on a second property." "Greed," my father said softly. The table went silent. When Elias Harper spoke, the room tended to tilt toward him. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. He spoke with the pulpit cadence, where every sentence felt like a commandment carved in stone. Scripture tells us that hoarding wealth is a sickness, my father said, smiling gently at me. Money is a tool, Avery. It is meant to circulate. It is meant to care for the tribe. When you hold it too tight, you strangle the grace out of it. I am not hoarding, Dad, I said, fighting the familiar tightening in my chest. I am investing. There is a difference. Invest in your family, my mother chimed in, reaching over to pat my hand. Her palm was clammy. Look at your brother. He is trying so hard with his new venture. A sister should want to lift her brother up, not count pennies while he celebrates his birth. The waiter returned, saving me from having to respond. He began unloading trays of ice, lobster tails, oysters, and tin after tin of caviar. The table groaned under the weight of the excess. Tessa began directing the placement of the plates, snapping her fingers at the busboy when he placed the butter dish too far to the left. "Boy," she called out to the man, who was easily 50 years old. "Napkin, now." I flinched. "Tessa, his name is on his tag. It is David." Tessa rolled her eyes, peeling a shrimp. "He does not care. Avery, he wants a tip, not a friendship. Stop being so performative." The dinner progressed in a blur of consumption. I watched them eat. There was something grotesque about it. They did not savor the food. They demolished it. Mason ordered a Wagyu steak, ate half, and complained it was undercooked. Tessa sent her risotto back because it was too creamy, then ate the replacement in 3 bites. My father ate slowly, watching us all with that detached, godlike observation, as if he were judging our souls while chewing on a scallop. I sat there, my stomach empty, my mind racing. I was 32 years old, a senior forensic analyst who could trace hidden assets across 3 continents. Yet at this table, I was reduced to a 12-year-old girl afraid of disappointing her parents. Finally, the plates were cleared. The table was wiped down. The moment I had been dreading arrived. The waiter placed a black leather folder in the center of the table. He did not put it near my father. He did not put it near Mason, the birthday boy. He placed it equidistant from everyone, a neutral zone. The silence that followed was heavy. Usually, this was the part where I reached out, sighed, and put down my card. It was a ritual, the Harper family dance. They ordered, I paid, and they rewarded me with 5 minutes of praise before forgetting I existed. But tonight was different. Tonight, I kept my hands in my lap. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. Mason cleared his throat. "So, great dinner." Tessa looked at the folder, then at me. Her eyebrows went up. "Well, are you going to get that? Avery, the valet is taking forever, and I need to get home to prep for my facial tomorrow." She reached out, picked up the folder, and slid it across the white tablecloth. It hissed as it moved, stopping inches from my water glass. I opened it. $4,872.40. I looked at the itemized list. The wine, the Wagyu, the extra sides nobody ate, the birthday cake fee. Even though the restaurant provided it, I closed the folder. I reached into my purse. The tension at the table evaporated. I saw my mother let out a breath she had been holding. Mason grinned, leaning back. "Thanks, sis. You're the best." I pulled out my wallet. I counted out 5 $100 bills. I placed them on top of the folder. "What is that?" Tessa asked, her nose wrinkling. "My share," I said calmly, "plus a 20% tip on the entire bill. Because you were rude to the staff." I pushed the folder back toward Mason. "Happy birthday, Mason." The air left the table so fast my ears popped. Mason stared at the folder as if it were a rattlesnake. "What, you are joking, right?" "I had a salad and water," I said. 500 covers that 10 times over. The rest is yours." "Avery," my mother hissed, her smile vanishing. "Don't be dramatic. Just pay the bill. Your brother doesn't have that kind of liquidity right now. You know things are tight with the startup." "Then maybe he should not order $300 steaks," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling under the table. I am not paying for this. I told you last week I was done funding these outings. We are family, Mason shouted. A few heads at nearby tables turned. You have the money. You sit on a pile of cash and watch us struggle. What is wrong with you? Lower your voice, my father said. He did not look at Mason. He looked at me. His eyes were cold. 2 chips of flint. Avery, pick up the check. It was a command, not a request. It was the voice that had made me kneel in prayer for 4 hours when I was 10, because I lost a hair ribbon. No, I said. My father blinked. It was a small movement, but for him, it was shock. Excuse me? I said no. Dad, I work for my money. I work 60 hours a week. I am not an ATM with a pulse. If Mason wants to live like a king, he can pay for it. Tessa laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Oh, honey. You think that money makes you important? You think because you have a corporate job and a sad little apartment downtown that you are better than us. She leaned in, her eyes narrowing. A single woman with money is just a tragedy waiting to happen. Avery, you have no husband, no kids, no legacy. What are you saving for a cat? Give the money to the men who actually build things. That is the only way you will ever be useful. The insult landed like a physical slap. It was precise. It targeted every insecurity they had cultivated in me for years. The idea that my worth was tied to my womb or my husband, and since I had neither, my only function was to subsidize the people who did. I looked at Tessa. I looked at Mason, red-faced and entitled. I looked at my mother, who was looking around the room to see if anyone was watching, more concerned with optics than her daughter's dignity, and I looked at my father, who was simply waiting for me to break. I stood up. I am leaving, I said. You walk away now, my father said, his voice dropping to a whisper. And you do not come back until you have repented. You are embarrassing this family. I think the bill is embarrassing, I said. I grabbed my purse. The cash is for the waiter. Do not steal it. I turned and walked away. Avery, my mother called out, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. Avery, come back here. Everyone is looking. I did not stop. I walked past the host stand, past the aquarium filled with lobsters that had no idea they were about to be put on a credit card that would decline, and out into the cool, salt air of the parking lot. I handed the valet my ticket. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped it. As I waited for my car, my phone began to buzz. Buzz. Mom. How dare you? You have ruined your brother's night. Buzz. Mason selfish bitch. I hope you choke on your money. Buzz. Tessa. We are going to have to call the deacon to cover this. I hope you are proud of humiliating your father. Buzz. Dad. We need to talk about your heart condition. It has grown hard. We will fix this. My car arrived. A sensible sedan. Fully paid off. I got in and locked the doors. The sound of the locks clicking shut was the most comforting sound I had heard all night. I drove out of La Jolla, winding down the coast, away from the mansions and the manicured lawns. I merged onto the highway, heading south toward the lights of downtown San Diego. The tears did not come. I waited for them, but they did not come. Instead, a strange clarity began to settle over me, cold and sharp. I had always thought that if I gave enough, if I paid enough, if I was successful enough, they would finally love me. I thought the money was a bridge I could build to reach them. I gripped the steering wheel. The city skyline rose up before me, glowing against the black sky. They do not want me, I said aloud to the empty car. My voice sounded strange, foreign. They do not need me. I signaled to exit toward my apartment. They need ownership. I did not know it then, but the war had started. I had fired the first shot by leaving $500 on a table, and they were about to retaliate with a nuclear weapon. The pounding on my door started at exactly 7 in the morning. It was not a polite knock. It was a rhythmic, frantic hammering that vibrated through the walls of my downtown apartment. I woke up with a gasp, my heart hammering against my ribs, tangled in my duvet. Sunlight was just beginning to slice through the blinds, casting long, jagged shadows across the floor. For a split second, I thought the building was on fire. I grabbed my robe, knotting it tightly around my waist as I stumbled into the living room. I checked the video intercom on the wall. The grainy feed showed 3 distorted figures standing in the hallway. Even in the low resolution of the camera, I recognized them instantly. My stomach dropped. It was my parents and Mason. I reached for the talk button to ask what was wrong, but before my finger could make contact, I heard the electronic chirp of the lock disengaging. My blood ran cold. The front door swung open. I had forgotten. 3 years ago, when I first bought this place, my sanctuary, the one thing I owned that did not have their fingerprints on it, I had given my mother a spare key fob. It was for emergencies. She had said, in case I choked on a grape or slipped in the shower. I had asked for it back 6 months ago. She claimed she had lost it. She had not lost it. Lorraine Harper stepped into my foyer as if she were walking onto a stage she had designed. She did not say hello. She did not apologize for the intrusion. She simply swept past me, her eyes immediately scanning the room, judging the tidiness, the furniture, the silence. "It smells stale in here," she said. "Do you never open a window?" Mason followed her. He looked awful. His skin was the color of wet dough, and his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. He was wearing a hoodie that cost $600, but he looked like he had been sleeping in a car. And then came my father. Reverend Elias Harper stepped inside last. He did not look at the apartment. He looked at me. He closed the door behind him, and then he engaged the deadbolt. He turned the thumb turn slowly, deliberately. Click, the sound echoed in the sudden silence. It felt less like he was securing the room and more like he was locking a cell. "Mom, Dad." I pulled my robe tighter, suddenly feeling very naked and very vulnerable. "What is going on? It is 7 o'clock on a Saturday." "Sit down, Avery," my father said. It was not a suggestion. They moved into my living room. My mother sat on my white sofa without asking, patting the cushion next to her for Mason. My father stood by the window, blocking the light, his silhouette looming over the room. "We have a situation," my father said, his voice level, "and it requires a family solution." "What kind of situation?" I remained standing. I was not going to sit. This was my home. I needed to maintain some semblance of territory. Mason put his head in his hands. He began to shake. "Mason made a mistake," my mother said softly, reaching out to stroke his hair. "A business mistake. You know how the market is. It is volatile. He took some risks to try and grow the family legacy." "What kind of risks?" I asked, looking at my brother. "Mason, look at me. What did you do?" Mason looked up. His eyes were wet. "I needed liquidity," he mumbled. "The crypto exchange was a sure thing. I just needed to bridge the gap until the Series A funding came through for the startup. I borrowed some capital." "From a bank?" I asked. Mason winced. "From a private lender," my father interjected. The air in the room grew heavy. In my line of work, private lender usually meant one of two things: a predatory hard money loan with 60% interest, or organized crime. Given the sheer terror radiating off my brother, I guessed it was the latter. "How much?" I asked. My father reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He placed it on my coffee table. $500,000, he said. I stared at him. $500,000, Mason. You borrowed $500,000 from a loan shark. "It is not just 500, Mason whispered, his voice cracking. "The interest creates a compound variance. It goes up every day I do not pay. They said they would come to the house. They said they know where Tessa gets her Pilates done." "Does Tessa know?" I asked. The reaction was instantaneous. Panic flared in all 3 of them. "No," my mother hissed, leaning forward. "She cannot know. You know how delicate she is. If she finds out Mason is in this kind of trouble, she will leave him. She comes from a certain world. Avery, they do not deal with this kind of mess. It would destroy this family's reputation if she filed for divorce." I looked at them. They were terrified of Tessa leaving. They were terrified of losing the connection to her old money illusion. They were more afraid of a divorce scandal than the fact that their son had essentially signed a death warrant. "So why are you here?" I asked, though I already felt the answer closing in around my neck like a noose. My father tapped the document on the table. "We need to pay them off. Today." "I do not have $500,000 in cash," I said. "And even if I did—" "We know you do not have the cash," my father cut in. "But you have this apartment, and you have your stock portfolio. We have spoken to a notary. She is willing to come over within the hour." I blinked, trying to process the insanity of what he was proposing. "You want me to sell my home?" "Not sell," my mother said quickly. "Collateralize. We need you to sign a deed of trust. We will take out an emergency bridge loan against the equity of this penthouse. It is worth over $2 million. Avery, it is plenty to cover Mason's debt. We will pay it back within 6 months. Mason has a deal pending in Singapore. Once that closes, the money goes right back into your account. You won't even notice it." "I will notice a $500,000 lien on my property," I said, my voice rising. "Are you insane? You want me to risk my home, the only thing I actually own, to pay off Mason's gambling debt?" "It is not gambling," Mason shouted, standing up. "It was leverage. You don't understand business. Avery, you just punched numbers in a cubicle." "I understand that you are broke and I am not," I snapped. "That is enough," my father commanded. Mason sat back down, sulking. Elias Harper walked over to me. He stood close, invading my personal space. He smelled of coffee and expensive cologne. "Avery," he said, his voice dropping to that deep, persuasive timbre he used during the altar call. "We are not asking you to give away your money. We are asking you to save your brother's life. These men, they are not Christians. They will hurt him. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to stand over your brother's grave knowing you could have saved him with a signature?" "Why don't you sell your house?" I asked, looking him in the eye. "Or the vacation cabin in Aspen?" "We cannot," my mother said, tears starting to flow. "Everything is tied up in the church trust. You know that. And if we liquidate assets now, the board will ask questions. It would trigger an audit. We cannot risk the ministry. Avery, your father's work is too important." "So my work doesn't matter?" I asked. "My security doesn't matter?" "You are single," my mother said, as if that explained everything. "You have no dependents. If something happens, you can bounce back. Mason has a wife. He has a public image. He has so much more to lose." I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the entitlement etched into their faces. They truly believed this. They believed that because I was the unmarried daughter, I was merely a resource to be harvested to protect the heir. "I won't do it," I said. My father's face hardened. "What did you say?" "I said no. I am not signing anything. I am not putting a lien on my home. If Mason is in trouble, he needs to go to the police, or tell Tessa and sell her jewelry. But I am not lighting myself on fire to keep him warm." "You selfish little girl," my mother spat out. The venom in her voice was shocking. "After everything we did for you, we gave you life. We raised you." "You raised me to be a spare part," I said. "I paid for my own college. I paid for my own car. I bought this apartment with money I earned while you were buying Mason-tailored suits for businesses that never launched." "We paid for your education," my mother shouted. "No, you didn't," I yelled back. "I worked 3 jobs. I took out loans." "We had the money," she screamed, losing control. "We had the money set aside for you, but Mason needed it for the incubator program in Palo Alto. We made a choice for the future of the family." The room went dead silent. My mother clamped a hand over her mouth. Her eyes went wide. I stood there, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. "What?" I whispered. I remembered that year. I was 18. I had gotten into Columbia. It was my dream. But my parents told me the church was struggling, that the funds were tight. They told me they could not help me. I had to go to a state school. I had to work nights. I spent 4 years exhausted. thinking my family was sacrificing alongside me. But the same month I started waiting tables to pay for textbooks. Mason had moved to California with $100,000 in seed capital. "You had the money?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You had my tuition money, and you gave it to him." My father stepped between me and my mother. He did not look ashamed. He looked annoyed that the secret was out. "It was a strategic decision," my father said coldly. "Mason had a vision. We invested in the person who had the potential to bring the greatest return for the family name. That is how dynasties work. Avery, sacrifice is required. Sometimes one child must step back so the other can step forward. It is biblical. Isaac was willing to be sacrificed by Abraham. It is the highest form of love." "You are comparing paying off a loan shark to human sacrifice." I laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. "You people are sick. We are your parents," my father boomed, his voice filling the small room. "And you will honor us. You will sign that paper. Mason is in danger. If you do not help him, you are no daughter of mine." I looked at the three of them. The brother who saw me as a wallet, the mother who saw me as a servant, the father who saw me as a distinct asset class to be liquidated. I walked to the door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from rage. I unlocked the deadbolt. I threw the door open wide. "Get out," I said. "Avery, be reasonable," Mason started. "Get out," I screamed. The sound tore from my throat, raw and primal. "Get out of my house. Get out of my life. If you ever come near me with a piece of paper again, I will call the police and I will tell Tessa everything." My mother stood up, smoothing her skirt. She looked at me with pure disgust. "You will regret this. You will die alone, Avery, and you will deserve it." She walked out. Mason followed, looking back at me with a mix of hatred and terror. My father paused at the threshold. He did not shout. He did not look angry. He looked at me the way a contractor looks at a load-bearing wall that needs to be removed. He looked calculating. "You think you have a choice," he said quietly. "That is your problem, Avery. You think your no carries weight, but you are still a child, and children need to be corrected." "I am 32 years old," I said. "I am done being corrected." "We gave you a chance to do this the righteous way," he said. "To do it voluntarily, to be a hero. But if you will not offer your cheek to be kissed, then you must offer your neck. Is that a threat?" "It is a prophecy," he said. He stepped out into the hallway. "God bless you, Avery." I slammed the door. I threw the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, gasping for air. My entire body was vibrating. They had admitted it. They had stolen my future once to fund Mason's failures. And now, they wanted to steal my present to cover his crimes. I thought it was over. I thought I had won because I had the door locked. I was wrong. I slid down to the floor, wrapping my arms around my knees. I sat there for an hour, just breathing, telling myself that they could not touch me. The apartment was in my name. The accounts were in my name. I was safe, but I underestimated them. I underestimated how desperate they were, and I underestimated what a man like Elias Harper would do when he felt his authority was being challenged. The clock on the wall ticked. 7:55. I did not know it then, but the countdown had already started. 48 hours. That was all the time I had left of freedom. In 48 hours, I would walk into my office and find out that I no longer existed. They were not going to sue me. They were not going to beg me. My father was right. He wasn't going to wait for me to volunteer. He was going to erase me. Monday morning arrived with the deceptive calm of an executioner hiding the axe behind his back. I walked into the lobby of Stonebridge Forensic and Risk at 8:15. I held a cup of black coffee in one hand and my leather briefcase in the other. My mind was already cycling through the tasks for the day. I had a fraud analysis to finish for a client in Zurich and a meeting with the compliance team at 10. After the disaster with my family 48 hours prior, work felt like a sanctuary. Numbers did not lie. Spreadsheets did not gaslight you. Algorithms did not demand you set yourself on fire to keep them warm. I walked to the turnstiles, the same way I had for 5 years. I fished my security badge out of my purse. It was a reflex. I tapped the plastic card against the reader. Usually, there was a pleasant chime and a green light. Today, there was a harsh, low buzz. A red light flashed twice. Access denied. I frowned. I wiped the card on my blazer and tapped it again. Buzz. Red light. Must be the magnetic strip, I muttered to myself. I looked up at the security desk. Marcus was there. Marcus had been the head of lobby security since the day I started. We exchanged Christmas cards. I knew his daughter was studying veterinary medicine at Davis. "Hey, Marcus," I called out, forcing a smile. "My badge is acting up. Can you buzz me through?" Marcus did not smile back. He did not even look me in the eye. He looked down at his monitor, his jaw tight. "I cannot do that, Ms. Harper," he said. His voice was stiff, robotic. "What do you mean?" I walked over to the desk. "It is me, Avery. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. "Your access has been revoked," Marcus said. He finally looked up. There was no warmth in his eyes, only a mixture of pity and professional distance. "I have orders to escort you off the premises immediately." Revoked by whom? My heart began to thud against my ribs, a heavy, dull rhythm. "I am a senior lead analyst. You cannot just revoke my access without—" "Ms. Harper." A voice came from behind me. I turned. It was not my boss. It was not HR. It was a man I had never seen before. He was short, wearing a rumpled suit that looked like he had slept in it. He held a thick envelope in his hand. "Avery Harper," he asked. "Yes." He thrust the envelope toward my chest. "You have been served." I stared at the envelope. "What is this?" "Emergency ex parte order," the man said, already turning to leave. "Temporary conservatorship of the person and estate. You are legally incapacitated. Ma'am, have a nice day." He walked out the revolving doors before I could even inhale. I looked at the papers. I ripped the envelope open right there in the lobby, my hands shaking so hard I nearly tore the document. Superior Court of California, County of San Diego. Petitioner. Elias Harper and Lorraine Harper. Respondent Avery Harper. I scanned the paragraphs. The legal language was dry, violent, and absolute. The respondent exhibits signs of severe paranoid schizophrenia and acute opioid dependency. The respondent has been observed engaging in erratic, high-risk financial behaviors indicative of a manic episode. The respondent poses an immediate danger to her own financial solvency and physical well-being. Attached was an affidavit signed by a Dr. Eris Thorne. I had never met a Dr. Thorne. I had never even heard of a Dr. Thorne. Yet, here was his signature, swearing under penalty of perjury that he had evaluated me and found me to be mentally incompetent. "This is a lie," I whispered. The lobby was spinning. "This is insane." "Ms. Harper," Marcus said. He had come around the desk. He was standing too close. "Please, do not make a scene. I have to ask you to leave." "Marcus, you know me," I said, my voice rising. "I am not on drugs. I am not crazy. My parents are doing this because I wouldn't give them money." "I cannot get involved, ma'am," Marcus said. He put a hand on my elbow. It was a gentle touch, but it was firm. He was guiding me toward the door. "HR has already cleared your desk. Personal effects will be mailed to your guardian's address." Guardians. The word tasted like bile. They are not my guardians. I am a 32-year-old woman. People were staring, the receptionists, the interns waiting for the elevator. They looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. To them, I was not Avery the analyst anymore. I was Avery the crazy woman who had to be dragged out by security. I shook Marcus off. "Do not touch me." I walked out the door. The morning sun was blinding. I felt like I had been punched in the throat. I needed to call my lawyer. I reached into my purse for my phone. I unlocked it and tapped the banking app icon. I needed to see if they had touched my savings. Login failed. User access suspended. I tried my credit card app. Account closed by administrator. I tried my investment brokerage. Account frozen court order. I stood on the sidewalk, surrounded by people rushing to work, and realized I was suffocating. They had cut off my oxygen. In the modern world, money is air. Without it, you do not move, you do not eat, you do not exist. I dialed my bank's customer service line. My fingers were numb. "I am sorry," the automated voice said. "The access code you entered is no longer valid." I hung up. I dialed the number for the HR department at Stonebridge. I needed to talk to Karen. She would understand. She knew I was sane. "Stonebridge Human Resources," Karen answered. "Karen, it is Avery. You have to listen to me. My parents." "Avery," Karen cut me off. Her voice was cold. "I have been instructed to direct all communication to your court-appointed conservators. We cannot speak with you directly." "Karen, I am not sick. They are lying. We received the medical order, Avery, and the court mandate. We have processed your termination under the medical incapacity clause." "Termination." I felt the ground lurch. "You fired me." "It is a buyout," Karen said. "Per your contract, we expedited the severance package and the stock option liquidation. Do not send that money to me." I panicked. "Karen, listen, do not wire that money." "It has already been wired," she said, "to the account provided by your conservators. It is designated for your residential treatment costs. Goodbye, Avery." The line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone, my severance, my stock options, 5 years of hard work, hundreds of thousands of dollars, gone. They had not just fired me, they had handed the payout directly to the people who had engineered the firing. My parents had framed me, gotten me fired, and then collected my paycheck as a reward. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone through the glass window of the building. I wanted to run back inside and tear the place apart. But I did not. A strange, icy calm washed over me. It was the same feeling I got when I found a discrepancy in a ledger that everyone else had missed. It was the feeling of the puzzle pieces clicking into place. I lowered the phone. I took a deep breath. If I screamed, I proved I was unstable. If I cried, I proved I was weak. If I ran to my parents' house and banged on the door, I proved I was violent. They had built a cage where any reaction I had would only tighten the bars. "Think," I told myself. "You are not a victim. You are an analyst. Who signed the order, Judge Whitaker? Who was the doctor, Eris Thorne? Who was the lawyer, Grant Halstead? This was not a family dispute. This was a complex financial extraction operation. My parents were not smart enough to pull this off alone. They had help. They had a team. And they had made one critical mistake. They thought they had taken everything." I turned and walked toward the parking garage. I did not go to my car. My car had a GPS tracker built into the navigation system. If the conservatorship was active, they would be tracking it. They would come for the car within the hour. I walked past my sedan. I walked out of the garage and down the street. I walked 4 blocks to a public bus stop. I waited. When the bus came, I paid with the only thing they could not freeze, the wad of cash I kept in the lining of my purse. I rode the bus for 40 minutes, heading south toward National City. I watched the neighborhoods change. The glass towers of downtown faded into strip malls, auto body shops, and check cashing stands. I got off at a corner near the shipyard. I walked 2 blocks to the Starlight Motel. It was a beige stucco box with peeling paint and a sign that promised color TV, as if that were still a luxury feature. I walked into the office. The manager was behind bulletproof glass. "Room for a week," I said. "Cash?" He did not ask for ID. He just took the $300 and slid a physical metal key under the glass. "Room 12, he grunted. "Checkout is at 11. I walked to room 12. It smelled of bleach and stale cigarette smoke. The carpet was sticky. The curtains were torn. I locked the door. I pulled the curtains shut. I sat on the bed and opened my briefcase. Inside, beneath a false bottom I had installed years ago for traveling to high-risk countries, was my Plan B, $20,000 in cash, a burner smartphone, and a black, unmarked laptop that had never connected to my home Wi-Fi or my work network. My parents thought they had cut the power. They thought Avery Harper was helpless without her credit cards. But they forgot what I did for a living. I hunted people who hid money. I tracked people who thought they were invisible. I powered on the laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. I did not log into my bank accounts. That would flag my location. Instead, I opened a terminal window. I typed in a string of code. 3 years ago, when I bought the penthouse, I had installed a custom smart home system. Thermostats, locks, cameras, motion sensors. I had set it up myself, and like any good paranoid security expert, I had built a back door, a root access entry point that bypassed the user interface. My parents had my keys. They had the deed. They probably thought they owned the place now. I hit enter. The screen flickered, and then a grid of video feeds popped up. My heart stopped. There they were. The camera in the living room showed my brother, Mason. He was walking around my apartment with his shoes on. He was eating a sandwich, crumbs falling onto my pristine white rug. He was dragging a suitcase, and behind him, my sister-in-law, Tessa. She was holding one of my designer handbags. She was holding it up to the light, inspecting it. I cannot believe she kept this in a dust bag. I heard Tessa's voice through the laptop speakers. It was tinny but clear. Who saves a Birkin for special occasions? What a waste. It is ours now, Mason said, his mouth full. He kicked his feet up onto my coffee table. Everything is ours. I watched them. I watched them violate my sanctuary. I watched them touch my things with their greedy hands. I watched them laugh at the life I had built. They were not just squatting, they were celebrating. They thought I was in a hospital, or on the street, or crying in a corner. They thought I was legally dead. They had stripped me of my rights. They had made me a ghost in the eyes of the law. Fine, I thought, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. If you want a ghost, I will give you a ghost. I was not going to sue them. Lawsuits took years, and I had no standing. A judge would look at my medical record and dismiss anything I filed. No, I had to destroy the narrative. I had to prove that the conservatorship was not about protection, it was about profit. And to do that, I needed to let them think they had won. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to get comfortable. I watched Mason pull a bottle of whiskey from my cabinet, a bottle I had been saving for my wedding day, if I ever had one. He cracked the seal and took a swig straight from the bottle. To the Harper Family Trust. He toasted to the empty room. I leaned closer to the screen. Drink up, Mason, I whispered to the glowing image. Enjoy it. I opened a new window on the screen. I started a new file. Target Harper Estate. Objective total liquidation. I was not the prey anymore. I was the hunter, and I had a front row seat to their destruction. The glow of the laptop screen was the only source of light in my cramped motel room. Outside, the sounds of the shipyard in National City drifted through the thin walls, the clanging of metal, the deep groan of cranes, and the occasional shout of a dock worker, but my world had shrunk to the 13-inch display in front of me. I sat cross-legged on the bedspread, which smelled faintly of industrial detergent and despair, and watched my life being dismantled in high definition. My custom security system, the one my parents thought they had bypassed by simply taking my physical keys, was broadcasting a live feed from every room in my penthouse. I watched as the front door swung open. Mason walked in first. He was dragging a suitcase with wheels that were caked in street grime. He did not lift it. He dragged it directly across the pristine white wool rug in the foyer. The dark streaks left behind looked like scars on skin. Man, look at this view, Mason said. His voice came through the laptop speakers, crisp and clear. I told you she was hoarding the good stuff. Tessa followed him in. She was holding a large iced coffee. She took a sip, looked around with a sneer, and then placed the sweating plastic cup directly on my antique mahogany console table. She did not use a coaster. It is so sterile, Tessa complained. She walked into the living room, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood. It feels like a dentist's office. We are going to have to sage the hell out of this place to get her energy out. Do whatever you want, babe, Mason yelled from the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator door open. We have the run of the place. The judge gave Mom and Dad carte blanche. I watched Mason pull a container of organic berries from my fridge berries I had bought for my smoothies and dump them into his mouth by the handful, dropping several on the floor. He did not pick them up. He stepped on one, crushing it into the tile, and kept walking. It was a violation so casual, so arrogant, that it made my stomach turn. They were not just staying there. They were colonizing it. They were marking their territory with filth and indifference. "Hold on," Tessa said. She stopped in the middle of the living room. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and adjusted her hair in the reflection of the turned-off television. "I need to update the followers. They need to know we are in a transition period." I watched, mesmerized by the horror of it, as she opened Instagram. "Hey, beautiful souls," Tessa chirped, her voice instantly shifting an octave higher into a fake, bubbly persona. She held the phone up, spinning around to show off my living room. "So, big news. We are doing a little emergency house sitting for a family member who is going through a really tough mental health crisis. We are just here to hold space and clear out the negative energy." She walked over to the coat rack where I had left my favorite blazer, a structured black piece I had worn when I presented my first major findings to the board. "Like, look at this," Tessa said to the camera, touching the fabric with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "So dark, so heavy, you can just feel the depression clinging to it. We are going to do a massive cleanse, out with the old, in with the light." She took the blazer off the hanger. "No," I whispered to the screen. She walked to the kitchen, opened the cabinet under the sink, and pulled out a black trash bag. She shoved the blazer inside. "Donate or toss?" she asked her livestream audience. "Let's toss. Bad vibes need to be incinerated." She laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound that made my blood boil. She was turning the destruction of my career into content. She was monetizing my erasure. My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to drive down there. I wanted to storm in and scream. But then, the analyst in me took over. The part of my brain that had spent 10 years hunting fraudsters woke up. "Let them play," the voice in my head whispered. "They are comfortable, and people who are comfortable get sloppy." I minimized the video window. I opened a terminal command line. When I set up the network for my apartment, I had built it like a fortress, but I had also installed a monitor, a packet sniffer that logged every keystroke, every website visit, and every file transfer that happened on my Wi-Fi. I saw a new device connect to the network. Device name Mason MacBook Pro. "Got you," I whispered. Mason had sat down at my dining table, on the video feed. I saw him open his laptop. He cracked his knuckles. I watched the data stream on my screen. Destination IP 192.168, URL. Request HTTP. Google.com. Search. QUS High Stakes. Vegas. Com. Login. King Maze 89. He was gambling. Of course he was. He owed $500,000 to loan sharks, and his solution was to try and win it back online. But I did not care about the poker. I waited. After 20 minutes, he minimized the browser. I saw him open a cloud storage drive. File access Harper Family Outreach Ledger FY24 XLSX. My breath hitched. This was it. This was the file my father kept on an encrypted drive in his study. I had never been allowed to see it. He always claimed it contained sensitive donor information for the church confidential confessions and tithes that were between the giver and God. Mason, in his arrogance, had made a copy, and now he was opening it on my network, unencrypted, because he thought he owned the world. I executed a command to mirror his screen. A spreadsheet popped up on my display. It looked like a standard accounting ledger at first. Columns for incoming donations, mission expenses, and community support. I scanned the rows. September 4th. Donation $10,000. Source anonymous. September 5th. Expense community outreach. Youth program. Amount $8,000. It looked legitimate, but then I looked closer at the metadata of the destination accounts. I ran a quick query on the routing number listed under Youth Program Vendor. It did not go to a youth program. It went to a shell company registered in Delaware called HGO Logistics. I dug deeper. I pulled up the corporate registry for HGO Logistics. Registered Agent Mason Harper. My eyes widened. I went back to the ledger. I started tracing the community support payments for the last 2 years. January 12th. Expense shelter supplies. Amount $4,500. Real destination Saks, 5th Avenue. March 3rd. Expense missionary travel fund. Amount $12,000. Real destination. The Ritz-Carlton. Maui. July 15th. Expense emergency relief. Amount $6,200. Real destination. Mercedes-Benz Financial Services. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the motel's air conditioning. This was not just Mason being irresponsible. The sheer volume of transactions, hundreds of thousands of dollars over 5 years, meant my father knew, my mother knew. They were funneling tax-exempt donations from their congregation money, given by elderly women on fixed incomes, by families hoping for a miracle into a shell company, and they were using that company to pay for their lifestyle. Tessa's old money facade, paid for by the collection plate. Mason's startup capital, stolen from the poor box. My father's blessed life. It was grand larceny, and then I saw it, the line item that made my heart stop. August 1st. Transfer purchase of real estate debt. Beneficiary Avery Harper, loan servicing. Note: acquisition of distressed asset. I stared at the screen. They had used stolen church money to buy the secondary debt on my apartment 3 months ago. They had been planning this. They did not just react to Mason's debt crisis. They had been setting me up to be the failsafe. They had bought the leverage on my home using illegal funds. So if they ever needed to liquidate me, they held the note. "You monsters," I whispered. I typed furiously. I needed everything. I initiated a full download of the ledger. I downloaded the email archives Mason had foolishly synced to the laptop. I downloaded the chat logs between him and my father. Download progress. 20%, 40%. On the video feed. Mason laughed at something on his screen. He had no idea that 10 miles away, the sister he thought he had buried was final nail in the coffin download complete. I immediately encrypted the files. I uploaded them to 3 separate secure cloud servers located in Switzerland, Iceland, and Singapore. I saved a copy to a physical thumb drive. I sat back, my heart racing. I had the smoking gun. I had the proof of embezzlement, wire fraud, and tax evasion. But it was not enough. If I went to the police now, my parents would spin it. They would say Mason was a rogue actor. They would say I hacked them because I was mentally unstable. The conservatorship order already said I was paranoid. They would claim I fabricated the documents. My father had friends in the police department. He had friends in the district attorney's office. He was a pillar of the community. I could not just expose them. I had to trap them. I had to make them confess. I had to make them sign their names to the crime in a way that no lawyer could ever undo. I looked at the screen one last time. Tessa was now trying on my jewelry, holding a diamond necklace up to her neck. "I deserve this," she said to her reflection. "Yes, you do," I said to the screen. "And you are going to get exactly what you deserve." I closed the laptop. I needed a lawyer. But not a corporate lawyer from a big firm. They would be too scared of the political fallout. They would want to settle. I needed a shark. I needed someone who was hungry. Someone who had a grudge. I remembered a name from my childhood. A man who used to attend my father's church. He was a brilliant attorney, a man of faith. Until he started asking questions about where the building fund was going, my father had destroyed him. He had spread rumors that the man was an adulterer, a thief. He had turned the entire congregation against him until the man lost his practice, his wife, and his reputation. Calvin Red, last I heard, he was working out of a strip mall in El Cajon, handling DUIs and petty theft. He was the only person in San Diego who hated Reverend Elias Harper as much as I did right now. I packed my laptop. I checked the roll of cash in my bag. It was time to go to work. I walked to the door of the motel room. I looked back at the unmade bed. The Avery Harper who had cried over a restaurant bill 2 weeks ago was gone. She had died in that courtroom. The woman walking out the door was something else entirely. I was the audit, and I was coming for the balance. The digital clock on my laptop screen read 3 in the morning. My eyes were burning, dry and gritty from hours of staring at pixels. But my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I sat in the dim light of the motel room, surrounded by virtual windows into a life that was supposed to be mine, but which I was now dissecting like a corpse on a slab. I had spent the last 6 hours pulling on a loose thread I had noticed years ago, but never dared to tug. Tessa Vaughn, my sister-in-law, the woman who claimed to be the scion of a Connecticut textile dynasty, the woman who looked down her nose at the new money coarseness of San Diego while demanding the finest linens and the most expensive wines. I had the ledger. I had the money trail. But numbers are only half the story. To win a war, you need to understand the enemy's psychology. I needed to know who Tessa really was before she became the woman currently sleeping in my master bedroom. I started with the basics. A simple background check on Tessa Vaughn, born in Connecticut between 1988 and 1992. 0 results. There were plenty of Tessa Vaughns, but none who matched her social security number or her claimed history. No graduates from Vassar, no debutante balls in Greenwich. I dug deeper. I ran a skip trace on her social security number, a tool I usually reserved for tracking international fraudsters. The system churned for 30 seconds before spitting out a single match. The name attached to the number was not Tessa Vaughn. It was Teresa Vang. I stared at the screen. Teresa Vang was not from Connecticut. She was from Henderson, Nevada. I opened a new tab and started searching for Teresa Vang. The picture that emerged was not one of equestrian clubs and summer homes in the Hamptons. It was a picture of survival, grit, and a long trail of financial wreckage. Teresa Vang had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 6 years ago. Her debts included $30,000 in credit cards, a repossessed Honda Civic, and an unpaid bill for cosmetology school. There was a mugshot from 10 years ago for writing bad checks at a grocery store. The woman in the photo looked younger. Her hair was a frizzy brown instead of the sleek blonde bob she sported now, but the eyes were the same. They were the eyes of a shark that had not eaten in a week. I found a petition for a legal name change filed in Nevada 4 years ago, just before she met Mason at a charity mixer in Las Vegas. "You are a fraud," I whispered to the screen. "You are not old money. You are no money." It made perfect sense. The desperation, the obsession with brands. The way she treated service staff with that distinct cruelty that only comes from people who are terrified they might be mistaken for them. She was not a wealthy heiress marrying a pastor's son. She was a con artist who had targeted the Harper family, thinking she was marrying into a gold mine. The irony was delicious. The grifter had married the embezzler, 2 parasites trying to feed off each other, neither realizing the host was toxic. But then I went back to the ledger. If Tessa was broke, and Mason was broke, how had they maintained the illusion for so long? I filtered the spreadsheet for payments labeled Outreach Assistance. I found a recurring monthly transfer of $4,000 going to an entity called Desert Rose Care Facility in Nevada. I looked up the facility. It was a nursing home, a very average, state-subsidized nursing home. I called the number, putting on my best insurance auditor voice. "I am calling to verify coverage for a patient," I told the receptionist, "a Mrs. Vang." "Oh, yes," the woman said. "Teresa's mother. She is in the memory care wing. The church pays her bill every month. Such a blessing." I hung up. My father knew. Reverend Elias Harper knew exactly who Tessa was. He was paying for her mother's care using stolen church funds. Why, my father was a snob. He would never knowingly let his son marry a bankrupt cosmetologist from Nevada unless there was a reason. I looked at the dates. The payments started 3 months after the wedding. I realized the dynamic instantly. Tessa must have confessed, or my father had found out. But instead of exposing her, he had bought her. He paid her mother's bills, and in exchange, Tessa played the role of the perfect, high-society daughter-in-law that the church donors loved to see. She was an asset to the brand. It was a transaction. Everything in my family was a transaction. I saved the documents. This was leverage. Tessa would turn on them in a second if it meant saving her own skin. But I needed more. I needed the kill shot. I went back to the gifts column in the ledger. Most of the entries were vague. Guest speaker honorarium, consulting fee, but there was one entry that appeared 3 times in the last year. It was listed as strategic advisory retainer. The amount was $5,000 per transaction. The recipient was Whitaker Legal Solutions, LLC. The name Whitaker triggered a memory. Judge Whitaker, the man who had signed my conservatorship order without even looking at me. The man who had screamed for security when the bailiff started reading the list. I pulled up the business registry for Whitaker Legal Solutions, LLC. It was not owned by the judge. It was owned by Margaret Whitaker, his wife. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. My father was not just stealing money. He was buying the judicial system. He had been paying the judge's wife $15,000 over the last year. For what strategic advisory Margaret Whitaker was a housewife who ran a garden club. This was a bribe, plain and simple. My father had likely framed it as a gift or a consulting gig to keep it off the judge's direct financial disclosure, but the intent was clear. He was buying a friend in the courthouse, and when the time came to lock his daughter away and seize her assets, he had called in the favor. "You stupid, arrogant man," I said, staring at the entry. "You left a paper trail to a sitting judge." This was it. This was not just embezzlement. This was federal corruption. This was the kind of thing that brought in the FBI. But I could not go to the FBI yet. I was a mentally incapacitated woman hiding in a motel. If I sent this in anonymously, it might get buried. If I walked into a field office, they would see the alert on my ID and call my father. I needed a confession. I needed them to say it out loud. I switched tabs back to the live feed of my apartment. It was nearly 4 a.m. The lights were low in the penthouse. I saw movement in the kitchen. Mason was standing by the island, eating leftovers out of a carton. He looked disheveled. Tessa walked in. She was wearing a silk robe, my silk robe. "Are you going to come to bed?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, lacking the sweetness she used for Instagram. "Get off my back, Tess," Mason snapped. "I am thinking about what? How to lose another 10 grand. Tessa crossed her arms. "I saw the notification on your phone. Mason, you are playing again. I am trying to win it back." Mason slammed the carton down. "Do you think this is a game the lenders are still calling?" "Tessa, Mom and Dad's plan gave us some breathing room, but we still need cash to pay off the principal." "Breathing room," Tessa laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. "Your parents are suffocating us. Your dad treats us like employees. Do this, Tessa. Wear that. Tessa, smile for the camera. Tessa, I am tired of dancing for your father just so he keeps paying for my mom's home." "Don't start," Mason warned. "I will start," she hissed. "We are living in your sister's apartment, wearing her clothes, pretending we are rich, but we are just waiting for your dad to wash the money through the account so he can give us our allowance. It is pathetic. It is necessary." Mason lowered his voice, looking around as if he suspected the walls had ears. "Look, once the sale of the apartment goes through, Dad said he would cut us a check for 20%. That is clean money. Tess, that is legal money. We just have to wait for the 30-day holding period on the conservatorship to clear." "Clean money," Tessa scoffed. "Nothing in this family is clean. Your dad is running a laundering operation out of a chapel. Mason. And now he has bribed a judge to lock your sister up just to cover the shortfall." I stopped breathing. There it was. Tessa had said it. Bribed a judge. Laundering operation. "Shut up," Mason hissed. "Do not say that word." "Why?" Tessa challenged. "Who is listening, Avery? She is probably drooling on herself in a motel somewhere, terrified to move. She is done. Mason, we won. But it does not feel like winning when I still have to beg your mother for credit card authorization. Just give it a month, Mason said, rubbing his face. We sell the place. We pay off the shark. We take the rest and go to Europe. Just stick to the script. I am sick of the script, Tessa muttered, grabbing a bottle of water. I hope your sister enjoyed her freedom while she had it, because selling your soul to your father is exhausting. She walked out of the frame. Mason stood there for a moment, looking at the dark window. Sorry, Ave, he whispered to the empty room, but it was you or me. He turned off the light and left. I sat in the darkness of the motel room. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I hit stop recording. I saved the file. I named it The Confession, MP4. I had it all. I had the ledger showing the theft. I had the proof of Tessa's fake identity and the payments to her mother. I had the proof of the payments to the judge's wife. And now, I had an audio-visual confession from the conspirators themselves, explicitly naming the crimes. It was enough to put them all in prison for 20 years. But as I sat there, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, hard reality. I had the evidence, but I had no voice. In the eyes of the law, I was Avery Harper, the paranoid schizophrenic. Any evidence I submitted would be challenged. They would say I doctored the video. They would say I fabricated the ledger. They would say the judge's wife was a legitimate consultant. And with Judge Whitaker presiding over my case, he would suppress everything. He would seal the record to protect himself. He would declare me incompetent and order me institutionalized before I could ever testify. I could not fight this alone. I could not be the one to present this to the court. I needed someone who could walk into that courtroom and drop the bomb for me, someone who knew the system, but who operated outside of my father's sphere of influence, someone who had nothing to lose and everything to gain by watching Elias Harper burn. I closed my eyes, thinking back to a Sunday morning 15 years ago. I was 17. There had been a scandal in the church. A young lawyer, a deacon, had raised concerns about the building fund during a business meeting. He had asked for receipts. My father had destroyed him. Within a week, rumors were swirling that the lawyer was having an affair. Then, accusations of mishandling client funds appeared. My father preached a sermon about wolves in sheep's clothing. The lawyer was disbarred. His wife left him. He lost his house. He disappeared from the community. A broken man, crushed by the weight of Reverend Harper's righteousness. Calvin read. I opened a browser window and searched for him. It took a while. He wasn't on LinkedIn. He wasn't on any major firm's website. Finally, I found him. A Yelp page for a solo practice in a strip mall in El Cajon. Sandwiched between a vape shop and a laundromat, Calvin read, attorney at law, specializing in DUI, bankruptcy, and tenant disputes. The reviews were mixed. Cheap and fast, said one. Smells like bourbon but got me off, said another. He was a bottom feeder now, a man scraping by on the edges of the legal system. But I knew something my father didn't. I knew that Calvin Red was brilliant. I remembered his arguments in that business meeting. He was sharp, meticulous, and fearless. My father hadn't destroyed him because he was wrong. He had destroyed him because he was right. And more importantly, Calvin Red had a motive. My father had taken his life away. I looked at the time, 5:15 in the morning. I packed the laptop. I put the hard drive in my pocket. I checked the cash. I was going to El Cajon. I was going to offer Calvin Red the one thing he had probably wanted for 15 years. Not money, not redemption, revenge. The neon sign above the door flickered with a dying buzz. The letter L in law burnt out, leaving the sign to read, AW Office. It was fitting. The place looked less like a center for justice and more like a waiting room for purgatory. I parked my rental car between a laundromat and a vape shop in a strip mall in El Cajon, 20 miles and a universe away from the manicured hedges of La Jolla. I pulled my hood up, gripping my laptop bag tight against my chest. I had checked my reflection in the rearview mirror before getting out. I looked tired. I looked hunted. That was good. That was exactly what I needed to look like. I pushed open the glass door. A bell jingled, a cheerful sound that had no business being in a room that smelled of stale tobacco, cheap coffee, and regret. Behind a desk cluttered with stacks of paper that looked like they had not been touched since the Bush administration sat a man. He was older than I remembered, his face lined with the deep grooves of a man who had spent too many years scowling at injustice. He was wearing a cardigan that had seen better days, and he was nursing a mug that I suspected contained something stronger than dark roast. Calvin Redd did not look up when I entered. "We are closed," he grunted, turning a page in a file. "Come back at 9, or do not come back at all." "I am not here for a consult, Mr. Redd," I said. He froze. He knew my voice, or rather, he knew the cadence of it. He knew the specific, polished diction that came from the Harper household. He looked up slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, but underneath the fatigue, there was a spark of intelligence that 15 years of bad luck had not extinguished. He squinted at me, and then his face hardened into a mask of pure revulsion. "You," he said. The word was not a greeting. It was an accusation. "You have a lot of nerve walking into this office. Did your father send you? Did he run out of people to ruin in the city? So he sent his daughter to pick the bones in the suburbs." "My father does not know I am here," I said, stepping forward. "My father thinks I am currently locked in a motel room, crying over my lost credit cards." "I heard," Calvin said, leaning back in his creaking chair. "Word travels, emergency conservatorship, drugs, paranoia, the whole package. I read the filing. It was a masterpiece of fiction. Grant Halstead writes good fairy tales." "You know it is a lie," I said. "I know Elias Harper," Calvin replied, his voice dripping with bitterness. "That is all I need to know. But that does not mean I'm going to help you. You are a Harper. You benefited from the machine that crushed me. Why should I lift a finger to pull you out of the gears?" "Because I have the ledger," I said. Calvin stopped. He went very still. I walked to his desk. I swept a stack of unpaid bills to the floor and placed my laptop on the wood. I opened it, typed in the decryption key, and spun the screen around. "Look," I commanded. Calvin looked. He put on a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. He leaned in. For a long minute, the only sound in the room was the hum of the refrigerator in the corner and the distant wail of a siren. Calvin scrolled. He clicked. He scrolled again. "Community outreach," he whispered, reading the lines I had highlighted. "HGO Logistics, the nursing home in Nevada." He paused when he saw the payments to the judge's wife. He let out a low, breathy whistle. "Whitaker," he said softly. "I knew it. I knew he bought him. I just never could prove the mechanism." He looked up at me. The hatred was gone, replaced by a hungry, terrifying intensity. "Where did you get this?" "I hacked my own apartment," I said. "Mason is using the unencrypted network. They are sloppy. Calvin, they are so drunk on their own victory that they forgot to lock the door." "This is it," Calvin said. His hands were shaking slightly. "This is the ghost I've been chasing for 15 years. This proves everything. The embezzlement, the shell companies, the bribery." "So we go to the FBI?" I said. "Right now?" "No," Calvin said sharply. He slammed the laptop shut. "Absolutely not. Why, we have the evidence. You have digital files obtained illegally by a woman currently declared mentally incompetent by a superior court judge," Calvin said. Standing up, he began to pace the small office. "Think, Avery. If we go to the feds now, who do they call? They call the district attorney. Who plays golf with the district attorney? Your father. Who signs the warrants? Judge Whitaker. By the time an agent even looks at this drive, your father will have spun a story that you manufactured this data during a manic episode. They will bury this, and they will bury you in a psychiatric facility so deep you will never see the sun again." I felt the cold reality of his words settle over me. "So what do we do? I cannot just let them win." "We do not let them win," Calvin said, stopping in front of me. "We let them think they have won. We use their greed against them. We do not fight the conservatorship. We weaponize it. I do not understand. The law is a trap, Avery, but traps work both ways. Calvin walked to a whiteboard on the wall, wiping away a diagram of a fender bender with his sleeve. He picked up a marker. Right now, they have an ex parte order. It is temporary. To make it permanent, and to get full control of your assets to sell them, they need a final hearing. They need you to be incapacitated so they can sign for you. Right, I said. They want to sign the deed to my apartment and liquidate my stocks. But, Calvin said, drawing a line, if they sign as conservators, they are fiduciaries. They are responsible, but that takes time. Courts are slow. Audits happen. He turned to me. What if you agreed to give it to them? What if you surrendered? I am not giving them my money, I said. Not the money. Calvin smiled. It was a wolf's smile. The estate, the whole thing, the assets, and the liabilities. He leaned in close. In California, if you transfer an estate voluntarily, you can attach a verified inventory, an inventory that becomes a public record the moment it is entered into the court log. If we can get them to accept the transfer in open court, and we slip the evidence of the crimes into the inventory list as liabilities or obligations, they become legally attached to it. They sign for the assets. They sign for the crimes. But they won't let me sign, I said. They say I am crazy. They want to do it for me. Exactly, Calvin said. So we have to make them want you sane. We have to dangle a carrot so big that they will drop the insanity claim just to get a bite of it. What carrot? Money, Calvin said. Hidden money. Money they cannot get with a court order. He pointed to my phone. Call your father. Now. Now. Put it on speaker. Let me do the talking. I am your new legal consultant. I am the guy negotiating your surrender. I hesitated. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was a gamble. If this went wrong, I was handing myself over to them. I dialed the number. It rang twice. This is Reverend Harper. My father's voice boomed, smooth, confident. Calvin held up a hand, signaling me to stay silent. He pitched his voice lower, rougher. He sounded like a tired, sleazy lawyer looking for a quick payout. Reverend Harper, Calvin said, my name is Silas Vance. I am calling on behalf of your daughter, Avery. Silence on the other end. Then, ice. My daughter is ill. If you are representing her, you should know she has no capacity to retain counsel. Any conversation we have is moot. I know, Calvin said, waving his hand dismissively at the phone. I saw the paperwork. Nasty business. Look, Reverend, I am not here to fight you. The girl is well. She is broken. She is in my office right now, crying. She wants to end this. End it how? My father asked. I could hear the suspicion, but also the curiosity. She is ready to sign everything over, Calvin said. The apartment, the stocks, the car. She just wants to keep her personal effects and walk away. She wants to leave the state. We can handle that without her permission, my father said dismissively. The court hearing is in 2 days. True, Calvin said. But there is a complication. The girl tells me she has a secondary investment account, offshore, crypto holdings, something about a biometric lock. She says it is worth about $3 million. I saw Calvin wink at me. $3 million? My father's voice changed instantly. The greed was palpable. We did not see that on the initial scan. Of course not, Calvin lied smoothly. It is in a cold wallet, Cayman Islands jurisdiction. Here's the thing. Reverend, that account requires a retina scan and a live voice authorization from the principal to transfer. A court order for conservatorship won't unlock it. The bank needs her to be of sound mind and physically present to execute the transfer. Calvin paused for effect. If you go through with the incapacity ruling on Thursday, that $3 million stays locked forever. The bank freezes it. But if you were to drop the medical claims, let her walk into court as a competent woman who is just making a voluntary gift to her family well. She can sign the transfer right there in front of the judge. You get the apartment, you get the stocks, and you get the crypto. Clean, easy. I held my breath. This was the pivot point. She is willing to do that, my father asked. She will stand in court and tell the judge she is doing this of her own free will. She just wants out, Reverend, Calvin said. She knows she lost. She just wants to give you the keys and disappear. She is terrified of the hospital. She will do anything to avoid being committed. And the terms? Simple, Calvin said. We draft a stipulation of settlement. You withdraw the petition for conservatorship. She signs a general transfer of estate. You get it all. We do it Thursday morning, but it has to be done on the record. So the bank sees the transcript and releases the offshore funds. A long silence followed. I could hear my father breathing. I could hear him doing the math. $3 million. That was enough to cover all the holes he had dug. It was enough to buy his way out of everything. Fine, my father said. But tell her if she tries anything, if she says one word out of script, I will have her committed before she can leave the witness stand. She knows, Calvin said. She is done fighting. See you in court. Reverend. Calvin hung up. He let out a long breath and slumped back in his chair. He took it, I said, unable to believe it. He actually took it. Greed, Calvin said softly. It is the only thing more powerful than his ego. He thinks he is getting a windfall. He thinks he is robbing you blind. He does not know about the inventory, I said. No, Calvin said. He thinks the transfer document is just a receipt for assets. He does not know that we are going to attach Appendix B. Calvin pulled a fresh legal pad toward him. He picked up a pen. Now, he said, his eyes hard and focused. We have 48 hours to write the most dangerous document in the history of San Diego Family Court. We are going to list every single dirty asset, every fraudulent loan, and every bribed official as a line item in your estate. And when he signs the acceptance, I asked. When he signs, Calvin said. He is not just taking your apartment, he is taking legal ownership of the theft. He is admitting, on the record, that he controls the shell companies. He is admitting he controls the bribes. Calvin looked at me. But you have to understand something. Avery, this is a one-way trip. Once you sign that transfer, you really do lose the apartment. You lose the money. You will walk out of there with nothing but the clothes on your back. I do not care about the money anymore, I said. I thought about Mason eating my food. I thought about Tessa wearing my clothes. I thought about my father telling me I was a sacrifice. I just want to see his face, I said. I want to see his face when the trap snaps shut. Calvin nodded. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a bottle of cheap bourbon. He poured 2 fingers into his mug and pushed the bottle toward me. Then let's get to work, he said. We have a bomb to build. I sat down opposite him. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise over the strip mall, casting a harsh, revealing light on the cracked pavement. But inside the office, we were operating in the shadows. We spent the next 2 days drafting the inventory. We were meticulous. We listed the HGO Logistics account as a subsidiary asset. We listed the payments to Margaret Whitaker as outstanding consulting liabilities. We listed the debt Mason owed to the loan sharks as a secured family obligation. We wrapped the truth in legal jargon so dense that only a forensic accountant or a very attentive bailiff would understand what they were reading. And my father? He was too arrogant to read the fine print. He wouldn't look. He would just see the bottom line. He would see the victory. He wouldn't see the guillotine until the blade was already falling. Wednesday night was a masterclass in desecration. I sat in the Starlight Motel, the air conditioner rattling like a dying lung, and watched my parents host a party in my home. They called it a prayer gathering for Avery's restoration. They had invited the inner circle of the church, the deacons, the heavy tithe payers, the people whose whispers could make or break a reputation in San Diego. But as I watched the high-definition feed from the living room camera, I did not see much praying. I saw a victory lap. My mother had hired a catering company. I saw servers walking around with trays of bacon-wrapped scallops and glasses of sparkling cider that looked suspiciously like champagne. I checked my bank alerts. Ping, transaction authorized Gilded Palate Catering. $3,450. Ping, Transaction authorized. La Jolla Florist, $820. They were burning through my liquidity before the ink was even dry on the transfer. Earlier that day, on Calvin's advice, I had authorized a temporary release of funds for household maintenance. I had signed the digital document with a trembling hand, or at least, I made the digital signature look shaky, telling their lawyer, Grant Halstead, that I just wanted my family to be comfortable while we sorted out the transition. They took that inch and ran a marathon. I watched Tessa holding court by the window. She was wearing my vintage Chanel blazer. She had rolled the sleeves up, ruining the silhouette, and she was gesturing with a half-eaten shrimp. "It is such a tragedy," Tessa was saying to Mrs. Gable, the wife of the church treasurer. "Avery just snapped. The pressure of the corporate world." We tried to tell her to slow down, to find a husband, to find God, but she was so obsessed with money. "Well, she is lucky to have you," Mrs. Gable cooed, touching Tessa's arm. "Stepping in to manage this big apartment, it must be a burden." "We carry the cross we are given," Tessa sighed. Taking a sip of wine, I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. "Keep talking. Tessa, every lie is another nail." I switched the camera view to the kitchen. My mother was there, arranging a platter of cookies. She was talking to my father. "Did Halstead get the final draft of the transfer agreement?" she asked. "He did," my father said. He looked majestic in his suit, leaning against my quartz countertop. "He spoke to that ambulance chaser Avery hired. Vance or Red, whatever his name is. They are ready to sign on Thursday. The girl is broken. Lorraine, she just wants to sign and leave town." "Good," my mother said. She picked up a cookie and crushed it between her fingers, dusting the crumbs into the sink. Then she said it, the sentence that would haunt me, but also liberate me. "You know, Elias," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I always knew it would come to this. Avery was too sharp, too independent. A daughter that strong is a danger to the natural order. Sometimes, you have to break the bone to reset it straight. Now that she is on her knees, we can finally mold her into something useful." "Amen," my father said. I hit save clip. My hands were shaking, but not from grief. I felt a cold, hard crystallization in my chest. They did not just want my money. They wanted my subjugation. They believed that destroying my autonomy was a moral imperative. "You want to reset the bone," I whispered to the screen. "I am going to amputate the whole limb." I checked the time. It was 8:30 in the evening. The party was in full swing. I switched the feed to the guest bedroom, the one I used as an office. Mason had retreated there 10 minutes ago. He was pacing. He looked sweaty. Tessa walked in and closed the door. "What are you doing hiding in here?" she hissed. "Your dad wants us to lead the toast." "I got a text from the lender," Mason said. His voice was tight, bordering on panic. "They know about the court hearing on Thursday. They want the first installment of $50,000 by Friday morning, cash. So pay them," Tessa said, checking her makeup in the mirror. "We have access to Avery's operational accounts now. Just wire it." "I cannot wire $50,000 to a loan shark from a Bank of America account." "You idiot," Mason snapped. "It triggers a suspicious activity report. We have to wash it first." "So use the church method," Tessa said. Bored. "I am trying," Mason whispered. "But the merchant account linked to HGO Logistics is flagged because of the transfer delay. I have to route it through the crypto wallet on the hard drive, then bounce it to the offshore shell, and then withdraw it as consulting fees. It takes 3 days to clear." "Well, figure it out," Tessa said, turning to leave. "I am not going to let some thug with a baseball bat ruin my debut as the mistress of this house. Just move the crypto. Your dad said he scrubbed the metadata." "Dad thinks scrubbing metadata means deleting the browser history," Mason muttered. "He does not understand the blockchain. Just do it, Mason. We are rich now. Stop acting like a criminal." Tessa walked out. Mason sat down at my desk, where I had built my career, and pulled a small, encrypted hard drive from his pocket. He plugged it into his laptop. I zoomed in on the video feed. I could not see the screen clearly, but I heard him typing. "Okay," he muttered. "Transferring 20 Bitcoin to wallet address ending in XYZ. I hit save clip. I had it. I had the admission of money laundering. I had the methodology. I had the link between the church funds, the shell company, and the crypto wallet. I minimized the video window and opened an encrypted email client. I typed in a subject line, whistleblower submission, urgent, Harper Global Outreach. I attached the ledger. I attached the video of my mother admitting to the conspiracy to incapacitate me. I attached the audio of Mason discussing the laundering of funds. I attached the corporate registry documents linking Tessa to her fake identity. I addressed it to 3 people. First, the special agent in charge at the San Diego FBI field office. Second, the senior investigator at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Third, a journalist at the San Diego Union Tribune who had written a piece about church corruption 2 years ago and gotten sued for it. I did not hit send yet. Calvin had been very specific. We do not fire the gun until they are in the trap. I scheduled the email to send automatically at 9 o'clock on Thursday morning, exactly 30 minutes after the court hearing was scheduled to begin. I sat back. The trap was armed. Now, I just needed to lure them onto the X. My phone rang. It was Calvin. "Are you watching this?" he asked. He sounded like he was eating takeout. "I am," I said. "They are enjoying the scallops." "Let them eat," Calvin said. "I just got off the phone with Grant Halstead. He's feeling very confident. He tried to lecture me about doing what is best for the client. He thinks I'm a pushover." "Did you tell him?" "I did," Calvin said. "I told him you are ready to sign the voluntary transfer of estate. I told him you are weeping. You are broken. And you just want to go to a retreat in Sedona to heal. And the condition—" "He agreed," Calvin chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "I told him that for your own peace of mind as part of your recovery process, you need to list out every single thing you are giving them, a full inventory. I told him you have a guilt complex about your debts, and you want to make sure your parents know exactly what they are taking on, so they aren't surprised." And he bought it. He laughed. Avery. He actually laughed. He said, "If the girl wants to list her shoe collection and her library finds, let her. As long as the real estate and the stocks are on there, we do not care. He wants the signature. He does not care about the paperwork." "Perfect," I said. "I am drafting the transfer agreement now," Calvin said. "I need you to send me the data for Appendix B, the poison pill." "I am sending it now," I said. I opened a new document. This was the most important document I would ever write. A standard asset transfer lists things like real estate and cash on hand. Appendix B was different. Appendix B was a list of assets and associated liabilities accepted by the conservator. I began to type, Item 1 condominium at 1200 Pacific Highway, value. $2.4 million, liability. Subject to immediate seizure due to purchase funds originating from wire fraud. See Exhibit A ledger entries, 405-412. Item 2, investment portfolio. Value, $800,000. Liability. Collateralized against high-risk currency short positions with infinite loss potential. Currently active and under margin call status. I had executed that trade 2 hours ago. I had used the last of my access to leverage my own portfolio into a position that would implode the moment the market opened on Thursday. I was wiping out my own savings to create a debt bomb that would land in their lap the second they signed. Item 3 Harper Global Outreach Consulting Ledger. Value negative. Liability. Acceptance of role as managing officer for all historical transactions, including bribes paid to public officials. See Exhibit C. Payments to M. Whitaker. I worked for 2 hours. Crafting the list. I listed everything. I listed the nursing home payments for Tessa's mother. I listed the illegal crypto wallet Mason was using. By the time I was finished, Appendix B was not just a list of assets. It was a confession. It was a roadmap to federal prison. And the beauty of it was the legal language. The preamble of the document stated, By signing this voluntary transfer, the conservators, Elias and Lorraine Harper, hereby acknowledge full knowledge of and assume full legal responsibility for all assets, debts, ongoing business activities, and historical financial obligations listed in Appendix B, indemnifying the respondent Avery Harper from any future liability. They would think they were signing a receipt for a fortune. They were actually signing a confession to a felony. I sent the document to Calvin. Received, he texted back a minute later. It is beautiful. It is lethal. I looked back at the video feed. The party was winding down. My father was standing by the door, shaking hands with the guests. He looked triumphant. He looked like a king who had just conquered a new province. "Thank you for coming," I heard him say to Deacon Miller. "Yes, it is a difficult time, but God is good. He has restored authority to the rightful heads of the family." "God had nothing to do with this. Dad," I whispered. I watched Mason and Tessa on the couch. They were scrolling through their phones, probably looking for vacation rentals in Italy. They looked bored. They looked safe. They had no idea that in 36 hours, the ground beneath them was going to open up and swallow them whole. I turned off the laptop. I did not need to watch anymore. I needed to sleep. I needed to look rested for my performance. Tomorrow was the final prep, but Thursday was the execution. I lay down on the lumpy motel mattress, pulling the thin blanket up to my chin. For the first time in 2 weeks, I did not feel fear. I felt the cold, quiet calm of a sniper waiting for the wind to die down. They wanted to own me. They wanted to own my life, my choices, my future. Well, as the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for, because on Thursday morning, they were going to get it all, every single cent, and every single consequence. The night before the hearing, the air in Calvin Redd's office was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and the ozone scent of a laser printer that was running too hot. It was 11 o'clock on Wednesday night. Outside, the strip mall was dark, save for the flickering neon of the vape shop next door. Inside, we were building a guillotine. "Read it again," Calvin said. He was pacing the small room, a half-eaten slice of pepperoni pizza in one hand and a red pen in the other. I sat at his desk, my eyes scanning the document on the screen for the 100th time. It was titled Appendix B, Comprehensive Inventory of Assets and Assumed Liabilities. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard, boring legal attachment. It was a list, just a long, dry list of things I owned. But in the world of forensic accounting, context is everything. Item 14, I read aloud, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. Intellectual property rights regarding the entity known as HGO Logistics. Good, Calvin nodded. Keep going. Sub-item 14A, I continued. The conservator acknowledges that HGO Logistics is a pass-through entity currently under investigation for tax non-compliance. By accepting ownership of this entity's assets, the conservator assumes full responsibility for all historical audits and pending penalties. Stop, Calvin said. He pointed the pizza crust at me. Is the language tight enough? Does it explicitly say historical? It says historical and retroactive, I confirmed. Meaning, if they sign this, they aren't just taking the company as it is today. They are taking the company as it was 3 years ago when they were using it to launder money. Perfect, Calvin grinned. They will think it is boilerplate. They will think it is just standard as-is language for a distressed asset. They won't realize they are signing a confession to tax fraud. We moved down the list. We had constructed the document like a layer cake of poison. The top layer was the sweet stuff, the real estate, the car, the jewelry, the things my mother and Tessa were currently drooling over. The middle layer was the debt, the underwater mortgage, the fact that the apartment was technically collateral for a loan I had taken out against myself, a loan that was actually funded by their own stolen church money. It was a circular firing squad of finance, but the bottom layer that was the nuclear material. Let's look at the gifts and outreach section, Calvin said, leaning over my shoulder. This is the part that worries me. If Halstead reads this carefully, he will pull the plug. He won't read it carefully, I said, typing a correction into the formatting. He is lazy. Calvin. He thinks he won. He thinks I am a mentally unstable girl who is handing over $3 million in crypto just to avoid a hospital stay. He is already spending his contingency fee. Still, Calvin warned, we need to bury it deep. I scrolled to item 32. It was nestled between a donation to a local animal shelter and a youth scholarship fund. Item 32. Strategic consulting obligation. Beneficiary M. Whitaker. Operating as Whitaker Legal Solutions. Status recurring monthly retainer of $5,000. Note: Conservator accepts responsibility to maintain this confidential advisory relationship or liquidate the contract. It looked innocuous. Whitaker. Just a name. Just a consultant. But to the man sitting on the bench tomorrow, Judge Whitaker, that initial was a bullet. You realize what happens when this gets read, Calvin said softly. The judge isn't going to just dismiss the case. He is going to panic. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct. That is why we need the reading, I said. That is the linchpin. I pulled up the cover sheet of the agreement. We had inserted a clause at the very beginning. Clause 4. Transparency of transfer. It read, in the interest of full transparency and to demonstrate the respondent's sound mind and voluntary intent, the respondent requests that the full inventory of assets be read into the public record by the court officer immediately following the execution of signatures. This is the gamble, Calvin said, tapping the screen. Why would they agree to read it out loud? It wastes time. Because I asked for it, I said. I told Halstead that I want the world to know I am giving this gift voluntarily. I told him I want my generosity on the record. It strokes my father's ego. He wants the church to hear how much I'm giving back. He thinks it will make him look like a benevolent patriarch who rehabilitated his wayward daughter. And instead, Calvin said, he is going to sit there while a bailiff reads out the name of his money laundering shell company and the name of the judge's wife. Exactly. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Grant Halstead. Speak of the devil, Calvin said. He hit the speakerphone button and gave me a signal to stay quiet. Grant, Calvin said, his voice dropping into that weary, beaten-down tone he had perfected. It is late. Please tell me we are done. We are done if your client is ready to sign. Halstead's voice came through, slick and arrogant. I just emailed you the final stipulation. We kept the language about the medical recovery vague, just like you asked. The Reverend is being very generous. Vance. He is agreeing to drop the permanent incapacity label as long as the asset transfer is total. She is ready, Calvin said. She is in the bathroom throwing up from stress, but she is ready. She just wants it over. Good, Halstead said. And the inventory list? Did you finish compiling her little treasures? Just sending it over now as Appendix B, Calvin said. It is long. Grant, she listed everything. Her shoes, her books, her grandmother's quilt. She is being thorough. She wants to make sure there are no disputes later. Fine, fine, Halstead laughed. I am not going to bill the Reverend for reading a list of used handbags. As long as the account numbers for the crypto wallet and the deed to the penthouse are in there, attach whatever you want. We will staple it to the back. And the reading, Calvin asked. She is insisting on the public reading. Grant, she has this idea in her head about public redemption. She wants the court to hear what she is sacrificing. The Reverend actually likes that idea, Halstead said. He thinks it is a powerful testimony, a prodigal daughter moment. We will allow it. Great, Calvin said. See you at 9. He hung up. The room was silent for a moment. Then, Calvin let out a sharp bark of laughter. He is not going to read it, Calvin said. He is going to skim the first page, see the real estate value, and check the crypto codes. He won't look at page 4. Greed makes you blind, I said. I hit print. The laser printer whirred to life. Pages began to slide out into the tray. Zip, zip, zip. Each page was a documented evidence of a crime, wire fraud, tax evasion, bribery, theft. I stood up and walked to the dirty mirror hanging on the back of Calvin's door. I looked at myself. I was wearing a gray cardigan I had bought at a thrift store an hour ago. It was 2 sizes too big. I had washed my hair but didn't condition it, so it hung limp and flat against my face. I wore no makeup. The dark circles under my eyes were real. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night for a week. I practiced my posture. I slumped my shoulders. I let my hands hang loose and heavy at my sides. I lowered my gaze. I did not look like Avery Harper, the sharp-tongued analyst who could spot a hidden offshore account in 3 minutes. I looked like a broken girl. I looked like a victim. "You look terrible," Calvin said, admiring the transformation. "It is perfect. They need to see what they want to see," I said, turning back to him. "They need to see a girl who has given up. If they see even a spark of fight in me, they will back down. They will hesitate." "They won't hesitate," Calvin said. He picked up the stack of papers from the printer. He squared them on the desk, the sound loud and final. "Here is the thing about predators. Avery," Calvin said, his eyes serious. "They never expect the prey to bite back. They are so used to the kill that they forget what teeth look like." He handed me the document. "Appendix B," he said. "Do not lose it." "I won't. And remember," Calvin added, pointing a finger at me, "tomorrow, when we walk into that courtroom, you say nothing. You answer, 'Yes, Your Honor,' and 'No, Your Honor.' You do not argue. You do not explain. You let the paper do the work. I know. Do not try to win with words," he repeated. "Win with their signature. Once Elias Harper puts his pen to that line, the trap is sprung. Until then, you are a ghost." I took the papers. They felt heavy in my hand. Not physical weight, but the weight of consequence. "What if the judge stops the reading before he gets to his name?" I asked. The fear was still there. A small, cold knot in my stomach. "He won't stop it," Calvin said, "because by the time he realizes where the list is going, the bailiff will already be reading the words that end his career. And even if he does stop it, it is too late. The bailiff is a court officer. Once he speaks it, it is on the record. The court reporter types it. It becomes fact." I nodded. I packed the document into my battered leather bag. "Go back to the motel," Calvin said. "Try to sleep. We meet at the courthouse steps at 8:45. Do not be late." "I won't be." I walked out of the office into the cool night air. The parking lot was empty. I got into my rental car and drove back to the Starlight Motel. I did not turn on the radio. I drove in silence, watching the streetlights blur past. Tomorrow, tomorrow. My parents would walk into that courtroom expecting a coronation. They were expecting to legally strip me of my home, my savings, and my dignity. They were expecting me to hand them the keys to the kingdom. I parked the car and walked to room 12. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about the dinner in La Jolla. I thought about the way my father looked at me when he locked the door to my apartment. I thought about Tessa throwing my blazer into a trash bag. They wanted everything. I closed my eyes, and a small, cold smile touched my lips. "You want it all," I whispered to the darkness. "Fine. You can have it all. The money, the house, the assets, and the fraud, the theft, the bribery. Tomorrow, you get exactly what you demanded." I rolled over and pulled the blanket up. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of my father. I wasn't afraid of his voice, or his judgment, or his godlike wrath. Because I knew something he didn't. I knew that tomorrow, he wasn't going to be the plaintiff. He was going to be the defendant. The air in Department 67 was heavy and stagnant, smelling of lemon floor wax and old lies. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands resting loosely in my lap, wearing the thrift store cardigan that hung off my frame like a shroud. To my left, Calvin read shuffled papers with the frantic energy of a lawyer who knew he was outmatched. To my right, across the aisle, my family looked like royalty. My father, Reverend Elias Harper, sat with his chin raised, radiating the benevolent authority of a man who believes God signs his paychecks. My mother, Lorraine, dabbed at her dry eyes with a handkerchief, performing the role of the heartbroken mother to perfection. Mason and Tessa sat behind them, dressed in somber colors, trying to look like concerned siblings rather than vultures waiting for the carcass to stop twitching. "All rise," the bailiff, Deputy Ruiz, announced. Judge Whitaker swept into the room. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. He glanced at my father and gave a barely perceptible nod. The fix was in. The script had been written. Today was supposed to be the final act where Avery Harper was legally erased. "We are here on the matter of the emergency conservatorship of Avery Harper," Judge Whitaker droned, opening the file. "I have reviewed the medical affidavits. I have reviewed the financial reports provided by the petitioners. Mr. Halstead, you may proceed." Grant Halstead stood up, buttoning his jacket. He smiled at the judge, a smile that said, "We are all friends here." "Your Honor," Halstead began, his voice rich and sorrowful, "this is a tragedy. The Harper family takes no pleasure in this. But as you can see from the evidence, Ms. Harper is in a state of rapid decline. Her spending is erratic. Her behavior is paranoid. We are simply asking the court to grant Reverend and Mrs. Harper full legal authority to protect their daughter from herself." My mother let out a small, audible sob. "We just want to save her," she whispered loud enough for the back row to hear. "Thank you, Mrs. Harper," the judge said gently. He turned his gaze to me. It was a look of pure condescension. "Ms. Harper, or rather, Mr. Red, do you have any objection to the permanent order?" The room went silent. This was the moment where I was supposed to scream. This was the moment where I was supposed to rant about conspiracies, proving my insanity. Calvin Red stood up slowly. He looked at Halstead. He looked at my father. "Your Honor," Calvin said, his voice raspy, "my client does not object." A ripple of shock went through the courtroom. Halstead blinked, his smile faltering. My father leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me," Judge Whitaker asked. "My client is tired, Your Honor," Calvin said, gesturing to my slumped form. "She recognizes that she needs help. She recognizes that the burden of her assets is too much for her mental state. She wishes to voluntarily stipulate to the transfer of the entire estate to her parents, effective immediately." Halstead recovered quickly. "Greed does that to a person." He exchanged a look with my father. I could see them doing the math. No fight, no long trial, just an immediate handover of the apartment, the stocks, and the $3 million in crypto Calvin had lied to them about. "Well," Halstead stammered, trying to hide his excitement, "if the respondent is finally seeing reason, we are amenable to a voluntary transfer. However," Calvin interrupted, "Ms. Harper has one condition." "Condition," the judge frowned. "She wants the transfer to be total," Calvin said. "She wants to wash her hands of everything, assets, accounts, holdings, business interests, and she wants the inventory of what she is giving up to be read into the record by the court officer, right now. She wants her sacrifice to be public." Judge Whitaker looked at the clock. "Is that necessary?" "It is her only request, Your Honor," Calvin said. "For her healing." My father whispered something to Halstead. Halstead nodded. "We agree," Halstead said. "Let the record show the Harper family accepts the gift." "Ms. Harper," Judge Whitaker said, looking at me, "do you understand what you are doing? You are signing away your home, your savings, your autonomy. Once you sign this, you cannot take it back." I stood up. I did not look at my parents. I looked at the floor. "I understand, Your Honor," I said, my voice quiet and trembling. "I just want it to be over. I want them to have everything they deserve." "Very well," the judge said. He sounded bored again. "Bailiff, present the stipulation of transfer." Deputy Ruiz walked over with the document. He placed it in front of me. I signed. My hand did not shake. Ruiz took the document to the plaintiff's table. "Sign here," Ruiz said to my father. "And here, for the acceptance of fiduciary duty, My father signed with a flourish. He smiled at my mother. He signed his name, sealing his fate. "And Mr. Mason Harper," Ruiz said. "You are listed as the operating manager for the business assets." "Yeah, that is me," Mason said, grinning. He grabbed the pen. He signed. It was done. They had signed the document. They had accepted the assets. And by law, they had accepted the attached inventory. "The court accepts the transfer," Judge Whitaker said, reaching for his gavel. "Case dism." "Your Honor," Calvin said sharply. "The reading—" "Oh, right," Whitaker sighed. "Deputy Ruiz, read the inventory into the record. Make it quick." Deputy Ruiz opened the file. He flipped past the cover page to Appendix B. He adjusted his glasses. "Inventory of assets and assumed liabilities," Ruiz read. His voice was loud, filling the silent courtroom. "Item 1, Ruiz announced. "Real property located at 1200 Pacific Highway, penthouse condominium, market value $2.4 million. My mother squeezed my father's hand. They beamed. "Attached liability," Ruiz continued without pausing. "Property is subject to an immediate federal lien due to purchase funds originating from wire fraud via the Harper Global Outreach Fund. The new owners acknowledge the debt and the criminal origin of the down payment." The smile froze on my mother's face. My father's head snapped up. "What?" Halstead stood up. "Objection. That is not—" "Sit down, counsel," Ruiz barked. He was not stopping. "Item 2, Stonebridge Investment Portfolio. Value $800,000. Mason smirked. That was the cash he wanted. "Attached liability," Ruiz read. "Portfolio is currently leveraged 300% against a short position on foreign currency. Margin call active as of 8 a.m. this morning. The conservators assume immediate responsibility for a negative balance of $1.2 million payable to the brokerage." "Negative," Mason yelled. "What do you mean?" "Silence," the judge ordered, though he looked confused. "Deputy, what are you reading?" "The document they just signed, Your Honor," Ruiz said calmly. "Item 3, business entity, HGO Logistics. Manager Mason Harper." Mason went pale. "Attached liability," Ruiz read. "Conservator acknowledges that HGO Logistics is a shell company used for laundering tax-exempt church donations. Conservator accepts full liability for 10 years of tax evasion and money laundering activities associated with this entity." "That is a lie," Mason screamed. Jumping up, "I did not sign that." "You just did, sir," Ruiz said, pointing to the signature. "It is right here." Pandemonium was bubbling in the room. Halstead was frantically flipping through his copy of the document. My father looked like he was having a stroke, but we were not done. "Item 4, Ruiz read. His voice dropped an octave. He looked directly at the bench. "Recurring liability, strategic consulting retainer." Judge Whitaker froze. He went perfectly still. "Beneficiary," Ruiz read clearly. "Margaret Whitaker, doing business as Whitaker Legal Solutions." The judge's face turned a color I had never seen on a human being before. It was the gray of wet ash. "Stop," Whitaker whispered. "Amount," Ruiz continued, relentlessly. $5,000 monthly, purpose undisclosed judicial influence payments. "Stop," Judge Whitaker screamed. He slammed his gavel down so hard the head flew off and skittered across the floor. "Deputy, I order you to stop reading." "I am reading the public record, Your Honor," Ruiz shouted back. "Item 5, nursing home care for Teresa Vang, also known as Tessa Harper, paid for by stolen charitable funds. Security," Whitaker roared, standing up, his robes flapping. "Clear the court. Arrest that man, seal the record." "Nobody moves," a voice shouted from the back of the room. The double doors of the courtroom burst open with a crash that shook the walls. 6 men and women in windbreakers stepped inside. On the back of their jackets, in bright yellow letters, was the word FBI. "Federal agents," the lead agent shouted. "This is a raid. Nobody leaves this room." My father stood up, his face a mask of terror. "I am a man of God. You cannot touch me." Elias Harper, the agent shouted. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. Mason Harper, you are under arrest for money laundering and conspiracy. No, my mother wailed, grabbing onto my father's arm. This is a mistake. Avery, tell them it is a mistake. I sat perfectly still. I watched as the agents moved in. They were efficient. They handcuffed Mason first, forcing him down onto the table where he had just signed his confession. Tessa was screaming, trying to hide behind a row of chairs, but an agent grabbed her, reading her rights regarding identity fraud. 2 agents moved toward the bench. Judge Whitaker stood there, trembling, looking for an exit that did not exist. Judge Whitaker, one of the agents said, we have a warrant for your arrest regarding bribery and obstruction of justice. It was a gift, Whitaker stammered. My wife is a consultant. Save it for the indictment, the agent said, spinning him around and cuffing him. Finally, they came for my father. Elias Harper did not fight. He went limp, the arrogance drained out of him, leaving only a small, frightened old man. As they clicked the handcuffs onto his wrists, he looked across the aisle. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with shock and betrayal. He looked at the daughter he had tried to break, the daughter he had underestimated, the daughter he had tried to sacrifice. I stood up. The chaos swirled around me. Lawyers were shouting, bailiffs were securing the exits, and my family was being dragged away in chains. Calvin Red began packing his briefcase. He looked at me and gave a small, grim nod. It is done, he said. Yes, I said. It is. I walked out from behind the defendant's table. I walked toward the aisle where the agents were leading my father away. I stopped in front of him. The agent paused, letting us have this moment. Avery, my father whispered, how could you? We are your family. I looked him in the eye. I did not feel anger. I did not feel sadness. I felt absolutely nothing. You wanted it, I said, my voice calm and cold, cutting through the noise of the room. You wanted the assets. You wanted the control. You wanted to own me. I leaned in closer, so only he could hear. You signed the paper, Dad. You bought the life. You bought the debt. I am your father, he pleaded. No, I said. You are just a line item in a ledger. I stepped back. Take him away, I told the agent. I turned and walked toward the doors. I walked past Tessa, who was crying about her reputation. I walked past Mason, who was begging the agents to check his crypto wallet. I walked past my mother, who was sitting in a chair, staring blankly at the wall, her world finally shattered. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the hallway. The air out here was cool and clean. It did not smell of lies. I walked down the marble steps of the courthouse and out into the bright San Diego sunlight. I had no apartment. I had no job. My savings were gone, wiped out in the margin call I had orchestrated. I had nothing. And yet, as I took a deep breath of the ocean air, I realized I had everything. I was free. They had tried to steal my life, so I gave it to them. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and started walking down the street. I did not know where I was going, and for the first time in 32 years, I did not care. I was Avery Harper, and I owned myself. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and ultimate payback. I want to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop your country or city in the comments below. I'd love to see how far Avery's story has traveled. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served ice cold, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need a little satisfaction today. See you in the next one.